Chapter 1. The Call to Adventure. The frigid winds howled across Greenland's rocky shores as Freydís Eiríksdóttir stood among the restless crowd at the docks. Her sharp gaze followed the ships that set sail toward Vinland, the rumored land of endless riches, a place her father, Eric the Red, had spoken of in wild stories. But Freydís was no mere listener of sagas, she was a maker of them. While the men debated their ambitions, questioning whether Vinland was worth the risk, she knew it was, and she would not wait for others to claim it first. She had the blood of adventurers, the cunning of a leader, and the strength of a warrior. Vinland would be hers. She strode toward the chieftains, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I will sail to Vinland. Who among you dares to join me?" Some scoffed, others whispered. Few had forgotten her fierce temper, how she had fought, how she had won. Her reputation was not one of mere survival, but of dominance. A handful of warriors stepped forward. Young men eager for glory, hardened raiders with scars from battles past, and a few cunning traders who smelled opportunity. They pledged their loyalty, trusting that Freydís would lead them to triumph, or at least to unforgettable war. By dawn, the ships were being prepared. Weapons sharpened, supplies gathered, spirits high. Freydís stood at the helm, the salt wind whipping through her hair as she watched Greenland fade into the horizon. Her legend was about to begin. Chapter 2. The Journey Across the Sea. The longships cut through the dark, churning waves, their dragon-headed prows slicing the water, as Freydís Eiríksdóttir stood at the helm, her grip firm on the ship's railing. The sky was a mix of storm cloud gray and fleeting patches of sunlight, as if the gods themselves were debating whether to bless or curse the expedition. The sea was merciless, testing the strength of those who had dared to follow her. The ships rocked violently as towering waves crashed against their hulls, soaking the warriors as they struggled to keep their balance. But Freydís did not falter. She had conquered men, and she would conquer the sea. Behind her, the crew whispered tales of Ægir, the Norse sea giant, and his feast hall beneath the waves. Some feared the sea god's wrath, others laughed in the face of such superstition. Freydís cared little for fear. She had only one destination, Vinland. At night, under the glimmering aurora borealis, the warriors huddled together, singing old battle songs to drive away the cold. Freydís watched them, silent and calculating. She knew loyalty was a fragile thing. One wrong decision, and the whispers of doubt could turn into revolt. She had no patience for weakness. Days stretched into weeks, and exhaustion gnawed at the edges of the crew's resolve. But then, a cry from the watchman. "Land!" The words sent an electric charge through the ship. Freydís stepped forward, narrowing her eyes against the salt spray, and there it was, Vinland, the untamed frontier. Her legend was no longer a whisper in the halls of Greenland. It was about to be carved into the soil of the unknown. Chapter 3. Landing in Vinland. Freydís Eiríksdóttir stood at the bow, watching the mist roll back to reveal the shores of Vinland, wild, untamed, and waiting to be claimed. The longships groaned as they scraped against the pebbled coast, their crews leaping over the sides, eager to feel solid ground beneath their feet. She inhaled deeply, the scent of damp earth, pine, and the salt spray that clung to her skin. This was no mere adventure. This was conquest. The first few days were spent securing the land. Her warriors cleared brush, erected shelters, and stacked provisions. Freydís demanded efficiency. Wasting time was a fool's luxury. The land was fertile, promising riches beyond imagination, but it was also filled with unknown dangers. Then the first sign of hostility appeared. Scouts reported movement beyond the tree line. Skraelings, the native inhabitants of Vinland. Freydís watched from the shadows as they emerged, small in stature but swift, their dark eyes scanning the Viking encampment with measured curiosity. Some of her men whispered of caution, others suggested trade, but Freydís saw only one path, dominance. When the first conflict erupted, it was swift and brutal. The Skraelings moved like shadows, striking from the forests and vanishing before the Vikings could regroup. Freydís, her axe in hand, did not flinch. This was not defeat. This was the start of war. Her legend was being carved into the soil of Vinland in blood. Chapter 4. Conflict with the Natives. Freydís Eiríksdóttir stood at the center of the Viking camp, sharpening the blade of her axe as watchmen reported movement beyond the tree line. The Skrælings, Vinland's native inhabitants, were watching, waiting. Their presence was a reminder that this land was not empty, not hers to take without a fight. The first skirmish was swift and brutal. A group of Freydís warriors ventured too far into the dense forest. The Skrælings emerged like ghosts, striking with speed and precision. Arrows flew, Viking shields splintered. By the time the warriors staggered back to camp, bloodied and breathless, it was clear that diplomacy was no longer an option. Freydís did not fear battle, she thrived in it. As dawn broke, she led her warriors into the heart of Vinland. The clash was chaotic. The Vikings fought with axes and swords, their war cries shaking the trees, while the Skrælings moved like shadows, striking from cover, vanishing before the Vikings could counter. Then, at the height of battle, Freydís did something unexpected. She ripped off her armor, exposing her bare chest, and let out a terrifying scream. She beat her axe against her skin, her eyes wild with fury. To the Skrælings, it was a vision of madness, of death itself. Superstitious fear rippled through their ranks, and in their hesitation, the Vikings pressed forward, turning the tide of battle. Though the Skrælings retreated, the victory was temporary. Freydís knew they would return, and next time they would come in greater numbers. The conquest of Vinland had begun, but it was far from over. Chapter 5. Betrayal and Power Struggles. Victory in battle was never enough. Power was fragile, and Freydís Eiríksdóttir knew it. The Skrælings had retreated, but unease still lingered in the Viking camp. Freydís could see it in the eyes of her warriors. Doubt, hesitation, whispers in the dark. Some questioned the wisdom of staying in Vinland. Others envied her command. She could feel the tension brewing like a storm at sea. Then the betrayal came. Two rival Viking leaders, brothers Helgi and Finnbogi, had grown ambitious. They had once been allies, sailing alongside her to Vinland, but now they plotted against her, whispering promises of leadership to those who wanted a less ruthless ruler. Freydís knew she had no patience for weakness. She summoned the brothers, their faces tight with forced smiles, knowing they could no longer hide their treachery. "You think Vinland is yours?" she asked, her voice calm, dangerous. "You think you can take what I have won?" When they stammered out weak denials, Freydís did not hesitate. She struck first. The battle within the camp was quick and brutal. Blood soaked the earth, Viking against Viking, ambition clashing against raw survival. When the dust settled, Helgi and Finnbogi lay dead. Their followers, terrified, swore loyalty to Freydís once more. But loyalty bought through fear never lasts. As she stood over the bodies of her enemies, wiping their blood from her blade, Freydís knew this conquest had come at a price. There were still threats lurking in the wilderness, and worse, threats. The fight for Vinland was far from over, brewing within her own camp. Chapter 6. The Return or the End. Freydís Eiríksdóttir stood at the edge of Vinland, staring at the waves that had once carried her to the promised land. But now, the tide had turned against her. She had fought the Skrælings, conquered her rivals, and carved her name into the wild lands. Yet Vinland refused to be tamed. The enemy was relentless, rising from the forests like spirits of the earth, striking and vanishing before she could stamp her claim. The land itself seemed to whisper against her, resisting her rule in ways no blade could counter. Her warriors were weary, their numbers dwindling. Whispers of returning to Greenland grew louder, and even she, the unbreakable, knew that some battles could not be won, not yet. And so she sailed home. The journey back was different. The sea did not challenge her this time. It carried her quietly, as if respecting the weight of her thoughts. She arrived in Greenland a legend, her name spoken with both awe and fear. She had dared to do what few had seized what others only dreamed of. But Vinland had slipped through her fingers, not conquered, but escaped. Some say she lived out her days in Greenland, wielding power through reputation alone. Others whisper that she never truly accepted her fate, that she dreamed of Vinland even in her final breath. But one truth remained: Freydís Eiríksdóttir had refused to be forgotten. Her legend would live forever. Epilogue: The Ghost of Vinland. Years passed, and the name Freydís Eiríksdóttir became more than a story. It became a warning, whispered among sailors, traders, and warriors alike. In Greenland, her presence lingered, an unshakable force, yet her mind often drifted to the land she had nearly claimed. Some said she sat near the fire each night, staring into the flames as if they held secrets only she could hear. Others believed she never truly left Vinland, that her soul had remained there, haunting the shores where her legend had been forged. Then the rumors began. On nights when the sea was restless, a lone ship was seen on the horizon, its mast barely visible beneath the rolling mist. Its sails, tattered but defiant, carried it toward the west, toward the forgotten land. Was it Freydís? Had she returned for one final conquest? Or had she perished long ago, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of her fury? No one knew for certain. But when the winds howled across Greenland's shores, some swore they could hear her battle cry, a call to Vinland that would never fade. Her legend lived on, bound to the sea, to the land she had fought for, and to the warriors who would follow in her wake. The tale of Freydís was never truly over,